Human love can be such a fickle thing, but God's love is a perfect love and everlasting love. Jeremiah 31:3 says, "The Lord has appeared of old to me, saying, Yes, I have loved you with an everlasting love. Therefore, with loving kindness, I have drawn you." God's love for his people is everlasting. Now, if there ever were a people who deserved to be forsaken, it would have been the nation of Israel. Their rebellion was met with God's discipline, but he reminds them in the 31st chapter of Jeremiah's prophecy that though he disciplines them, he will not desert them. They are a covenant people, and God will be faithful to his promise even when his children are not. Now, Christians in this dispensation are under the new covenant, and the God of Israel is our God. He cannot be other than loving to us, for it is his immutable nature. Now, some would say that such a doctrine gives a license for sin, and they want you to believe that God's love is conditional, rooted in our changeable nature rather than in God's unchanging one. But the reality is that his love will not let us go. No matter what it takes to bring us back to himself, God will exert that pressure. He holds us in his hand and no one can extract us. Should we seek to foolishly break his grip, he squeezes ever tighter. Just picture a small child holding his father's hand as they cross a busy street. The little fella may want to pull away, even cry that he's being restrained. But what kind of father would let him loose? No, love squeezes tight. If we love like this, how much greater is God's everlasting love? God speaks here of how Israel received grace in verse 2. Thus says the Lord, the people who survived the sword found grace in the wilderness when Israel sought for rest. Now, grace is God's unmerited favor. It's given by the decree of God based solely on his nature and having nothing to do with any merit of ours. We did not deserve grace when God gave it at first, and we cannot keep it because we deserve it at the last. From start to finish, it is all of grace and all of God. God's everlasting love means that it was set on us before the world was created. Before there was a man or woman formed by God, he knew you and had purpose to love you. In time, you were chosen by him for eternity, were regenerated by the Spirit, God's love indwelling you and sealing you as his own. Now, when time shall be no more, his everlasting love remains, and our love for him will be perfected. The consideration of God's everlasting love is meant to lead us to celebration. We pick up at verses 4 through 9 in Jeremiah's prophecy, chapter 31. Again, I will build you, and you will be built, O virgin Israel. Again, you shall adorn yourself with tambourines and go forth in the dance of merrymakers. Again, you shall plant vineyards on the mountains of Samaria. The planters shall plant and shall enjoy the fruit. For there shall be a day when watchmen will call in the hill country of Ephraim, Arise, let us go up to Zion, to the Lord our God. For thus says the Lord, Sing aloud with gladness for Jacob, and raise shouts for the chief of the nations. Proclaim, give praise, and say, O Lord, save your people, the remnant of Israel. Behold, I will bring them from the north country and gather them from the farthest part of the earth. Among them the blind and the lame, the pregnant woman and she who is in labor together. A great company, they shall return here. With weeping they shall come, and with pleas for mercy I will lead them back. I will make them walk by brooks of water, in a straight path in which they shall not stumble. For I am a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn. Israel is going to go through some suffering yet, and it's mentioned here. They are a people, except for a very small remnant, that are still in unbelief. But that's going to change. God's love for them will prevail, and what a day of rejoicing that will be when God brings them home. We may be sure that though God allows us to go through fiery trials, it's not an evidence of his condemnation, but his compassion. He's refining us, consuming the dross, so that only the pure gold remains. At all times we can glory in His grace and worship the eternal God of everlasting love. Imagine what it's going to be like when we reach heaven, and with all the redeemed of all the ages in an environment of infinite love. Oh, that's the joy that awaits us. We can begin to experience a foretaste by meditating upon the everlasting love of God now. The Lord our shepherd will gather all straying sheep of His flock. Listen to verse 10. I love this. Hear the word of the Lord, O nations, and declare it in the coastlands far away. Say, He who scattered Israel will gather him, and will keep him as a shepherd keeps his flock. He's not only a shepherd, He's a redeemer. Verse 11, for the Lord has ransomed Jacob and has redeemed him from hands too strong for him. Maybe too strong for us, but not too strong for the almighty hand of God to hold us. Praise His name for His everlasting love.